Every action has a consequence. Tonight's story will show what happens when rules are broken. And when it ends, join me in the comments.
At exactly 3:11 a.m., Sola woke up to the sound of wood dragging slowly across cement. Not a loud sound, not a violent one, just the quiet, deliberate scrape of something being pulled, little by little. His eyes opened, heavy with sleep, and he stared at the ceiling of the tiny face me, I face you apartment. The paint above his head was peeling in patches like dried wounds. A mosquito hummed lazily near the window. Everything looked normal, but the sound continued. Skr, skr. Sola sat up in bed. He was sure he had locked his door. He was sure he had not moved anything before sleeping. Yet when he turned his head toward the wardrobe, his chest tightened. The plastic chair he had left beside the wall was no longer there. It was now beside his bed, facing him. The chair was close enough for him to stretch out his hand and touch it. Its hollow back stared at him like an open mouth. One leg rested slightly on the edge of the thin rug on the floor, as though it had been carefully positioned. Sola's heart began to pound. He stood up slowly, his bare feet cold against the cement floor, and dragged the chair back to where it was supposed to be. "Maybe I kicked it while sleeping," he muttered to himself, though he knew he had not. He returned to bed, forcing his eyes shut, telling himself he was tired, that the stress of moving into a new place was playing tricks on his mind. The apartment had not been his first choice, but it was cheap. The room was small, barely enough space for a mattress, a wardrobe, a table, and that single plastic chair. The walls were thin, stained in places by old dampness. From his window, he could hear the constant Lagos night, buses groaning on the road, distant arguments, generators coughing in the dark. It was not comfort he came for, it was survival. Earlier that evening, the landlord, Mr. Ade, had handed him the key without much talk. "Power is prepaid, water flows every morning, no noise after midnight," the man had said, avoiding Sola's eyes. Nothing about the room felt welcoming, yet Sola was too tired to notice. Back on his bed now, he turned his face to the wall and tried to sleep. Then he heard it again. This time it was closer. Skr. He did not open his eyes. He could feel the sound inside his bones. He could feel the cold air shift, like something had moved between the door and the bed. The chair was no longer where he pushed it, he knew without looking, and somehow, deep inside him, a small voice whispered a truth he had never learned before. Some rooms do not sleep, they only wait. The next morning, Shola woke up with a strange heaviness in his body. It was not sickness, it was the kind of tiredness that sleep does not cure. Sunlight filtered weakly through the small window, cutting thin lines across the cement floor. The plastic chair was back beside the wardrobe, exactly where he had left it before forcing himself to sleep. He sat up slowly on the mattress, rubbing his eyes. It was just stress, he told himself, nothing else. Outside his door, the corridor of the Face Me, I Face You apartment was already alive. Buckets clanged against the tap in the compound. Someone argued over whose turn it was to fetch water. A radio played a morning program too loudly. Life was moving on, only his mind was stuck in the night. When he stepped out of his room barefoot, wearing his faded sky blue polo shirt and dark charcoal trousers, a woman down the corridor paused mid-sentence when she saw him. She was old, thin, wrapped in a dull Ankara wrapper. Her eyes followed him too carefully, as though she was counting something invisible on his body. "Good morning, Ma," Shola greeted politely. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she glanced past him into his room. Then she leaned closer and spoke in a low voice. "You slept here last night?" "Yes, Ma." She shook her head slowly. Another tenant, a young man with headphones hanging loosely on his neck, overheard them and stopped. "You are the new person, Abi?" he asked Shola. "The one that took that room?" Shola forced a smile. "Yes, is there any problem with it?" The two of them exchanged looks. The old woman cleared her throat. "My son, if anything strange happens at night—" "It is nothing," the young man cut in quickly. "This house is old. Things creak. You know how these buildings are." The woman stared at him in disbelief. "You cannot just tell him it is nothing," she snapped. People were beginning to look. Shola felt embarrassed. "Ma, it's okay. I heard a sound last night, but I think it was just my imagination." The old woman stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "In this compound, imagination does not move furniture." Shola laughed nervously. "Auntie, I was tired. I probably kicked the chair." Her face hardened. "My son," she said slowly, "chairs do not walk in the night." Before he could reply, the landlord's voice echoed from the stairway. "Auntie Bisi!" The old woman stiffened. "Yes, Mr. Ade?" "Please mind your business. People are trying to live peacefully here." Shola turned and saw the landlord descending the stairs, his face unreadable. "You," Mr. Ade said to Shola, "I hope you slept well." "Yes, sir," Shola replied, unsure of what else to say. "Good. There is nothing wrong with that room," the landlord continued, staring directly at Auntie Bisi. "People like to tell stories. Do not listen to them." Auntie Bisi opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. As Shola walked back into his room, he told himself the same thing. Old people exaggerate. Everyone wants to be mysterious. Yet as he closed the door behind him, he noticed something that made his stomach twist. The plastic chair was not where he had left it. It had moved again, just a little, closer to the bed. Night fell faster than Shola expected. By 9 p.m., the corridor outside his room had gone quiet. The generator downstairs coughed twice and went silent. Only the distant hum of traffic floated in from the road far beyond the compound. Inside his room, Shola sat on the edge of the mattress, still wearing his faded sky blue polo shirt and dark charcoal trousers. He stared at the plastic chair like it was an object that had offended him. It stood quietly beside the wardrobe, too quietly. He remembered Auntie Bisi's words, "Chairs do not walk in the night." With a nervous laugh, he grabbed the chair and pushed it farther away from the bed, pressing it firmly against the wall. "There," he said aloud, "stay there." Sleep did not come easily. Every sound in the building seemed louder, a door closing somewhere, the rattle of zinc roofing in the wind, the dripping of a distant tap. When his eyes finally closed, they did so reluctantly, like they were afraid of what they might miss. Then the room changed, not with noise, with pressure. Shola's eyes snapped open. The darkness in the room felt thicker, heavier, as though the air itself had been replaced with something slow and breathing. He tried to sit up. His body refused. His arms lay stiff at his sides. His legs would not move. Panic surged through his chest, but even his scream was trapped behind his teeth. From the corner of the room came a sound. Skrrr. The plastic chair was moving. This time it was not subtle. The scraping was steady, intentional. The chair slid away from the wall, inch by inch, its legs leaving faint lines on the cement floor. Shola watched in terror, unable to blink as it dragged itself closer to the bed. His heart hammered so hard he was sure it would tear his ribs apart. The chair stopped, right beside his mattress. The hollow back leaned forward slightly. Then something unseen pressed down on the mattress beside him. The thin foam sank slowly, as if an invisible body was sitting there. Shola's breath came out in a weak, broken gasp. The room smelled suddenly of damp wood and old dust, like furniture locked away in forgotten places. A whisper brushed past his ear. Not words, breath. Cold, wet. It lingered, exploring his skin until tears streamed down his face without his permission. Then just as suddenly as it began, the pressure lifted. The mattress rose. The chair slid back slowly, obediently to the wardrobe. Shola could move again. He sprang up from the bed and collapsed to the floor, sobbing silently, hugging his knees in the dark. He did not sleep again that night, and for the first time he knew without doubt whatever was in that room did not want the chair. It wanted him. The morning after the terrifying night, Shola barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the window kept him alert. He could still feel the phantom weight pressing on the mattress, the cold breath brushing his skin. By mid-morning, curiosity pushed him toward Auntie Bc's door. He knocked softly. "Ah, my son," she said before he could speak. "I was expecting you." Shola hesitated, then asked, "Ma, can you tell me about this room?" Her eyes darkened, and she gestured for him to sit on the small wooden chair in her corridor. "Many years ago," she began, "this room belonged to a family, a young couple. The man was careless, just like you. He ignored warnings. The wife," she paused, her gaze distant, "she disappeared one night, never returned. People say the chair watched him while he slept, moved on its own, left marks, marks that never healed." Shola swallowed hard. "Marks?" "Yes, some say it's not the chair itself," she whispered. "It's something attached to it, something waiting. It feeds on fear, and if you are careless, it will claim you too." Shola felt a chill crawl down his spine. "But why me? I'd just moved in." "Because," she said firmly, leaning closer, "the room chooses, it always does, and now it has chosen you." She lowered her voice to almost a hiss. "If you value your life, always turn your chair upside down before sleeping." Shola blinked, trying to absorb the weight of her words. "Upside down?" "Yes, flip it. Every night. Do not forget. Some rules are not meant to be broken, my son. Never." He left her apartment with his head spinning. That afternoon, he carefully picked up the chair in his room and flipped it upside down. The legs pointed skyward like spindly fingers. For the first time since moving in, the apartment felt still. But as night fell, the shadows seemed to stretch, waiting for him to forget. Shola lay on the mattress, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The room was silent, almost too silent. The plastic chair sat upside down near the wardrobe, and though nothing moved, he could feel it, watching. And deep inside, he realized this was only the beginning. Shola did not sleep that night. He lay on his mattress, eyes open, listening to the quietness of the room, waiting for something to happen. The plastic chair was upside down near the wardrobe, its four legs pointing toward the ceiling like thin warning fingers. Nothing moved. No scraping, no pressure on the mattress, no cold breath brushing past his ear. For the first time since moving in, the room felt normal. By morning, Shola was almost smiling. So Auntie Bc was right, he thought. It's just about turning the chair upside down. That confidence was the beginning of his mistake. That evening, as he returned from work, he stared at the chair again. He told himself he was tired of being afraid of plastic and shadows. He picked the chair up, placed it properly on the floor, and pushed it back beside the wardrobe. Then he laughed. "Let me see you move tonight," he said aloud, as though daring the room. He lay down to sleep with the chair standing upright. Sleep came quickly, heavy and deep, but at exactly 2:44 a.m., his eyes flew open. The room was not dark. It was watching. His body was heavy again. His arms refused to lift. His legs were stiff, locked to the mattress. Panic rose in his throat like bile. From the far corner, the plastic chair began to vibrate. Not move, vibrate. The legs rattled softly against the cement, trembling like something struggling to wake up. Shola tried to shout. Nothing came out. The chair jerked once, twice. Then it dragged itself away from the wall. Skrrr. The sound was sharper now, angry, impatient. It stopped halfway between the wardrobe and the bed. And then the room went silent. Shola lay there, sweat soaking his shirt, staring at the space between himself and the chair, knowing that he had just broken the only rule keeping him alive. Shola did not go to work the next morning. He tried. He sat on the edge of his mattress, feet touching the cold cement, telling himself to stand up, but when he leaned forward, a sharp pain tore through his lower back, spreading down his legs like fire. He collapsed back onto the bed with a groan. His legs felt distant, not numb, not asleep, just far away, as if they no longer fully belonged to him. He lay there for a long time, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the noise of the compound waking up without him, buckets clashing, children crying, women calling each other from door to door. No one knocked on his door. By noon, hunger gnawed at him, but the thought of standing made his chest tighten with fear. When he finally forced himself upright, his knees buckled beneath him. He grabbed the edge of the wardrobe to stop himself from falling, breathing hard like he had just run a long distance. The plastic chair was still standing upright. He could not bring himself to touch it. All through the afternoon, a strange weakness crawled through his body. His fingers trembled when he tried to hold his phone. His legs dragged when he moved from one side of the room to the other. By evening, sweat soaked his faded sky blue polo shirt, even though the room was cool. He remembered Auntie Bisi's warning, always turn your chair upside down before sleeping. With shaking hands, he reached for the plastic chair and flipped it upside down near the wardrobe. The moment its legs pointed upward, something inside him loosened. The pain in his back faded slightly, the heaviness in his legs retreated, not completely, but enough for him to stand without holding on to anything. Shola sank onto his mattress, exhausted, staring at the chair. It was no longer just an object, it was a boundary, and he was now living on the wrong side of it.
Shola woke up before dawn, his body aching like it had been beaten all night. The plastic chair was still upside down near the wardrobe. For once it had stayed where he left it. Yet something was wrong. He tried to stand. His legs shook beneath him, weak like they no longer trusted his weight. He grabbed the wall, steadying himself, breathing hard until the dizziness passed. By mid-morning, he could not ignore it anymore. This was no longer fear. It was damage. He dragged himself out of his room and followed the narrow passage until he reached Auntie Bisi's door. This time, he did not knock gently. He knocked like a man who had run out of time. When she opened the door and saw him leaning heavily against the wall, her face tightened. "You did not obey," she said quietly. Shola swallowed. "Ma, I tried, but it still touched me." She stepped aside and let him into her room. Inside, the air smelled of camphor and old herbs. A faded calendar hung crookedly on the wall. Small bottles filled with dark liquids lined a shelf near her bed. She guided him to a stool and sat opposite him. "You are not the first," she began. "This room has eaten people before you. Men who laughed, women who are brave. They all thought they were stronger than rules." "What is it?" Shola whispered. "What is inside my room?" Auntie Bisi shook her head slowly. "It is not inside your room, my son. It is attached to it. That chair is only the door." Shola felt his throat tighten. There are things that do not walk into houses. They wait to be invited. A chair standing at night is a seat prepared for them. When you disobey, you give it a place to rest. She reached into a drawer and brought out a small leather pouch. "This will not stop it forever," she said, pressing it into her trembling hand, "but it will weaken it. Keep the chair upside down, pray, and whatever you hear at night, do not answer." Shola held the pouch like a lifeline. As he left her room, leaning on the wall for support, he realized something painful. Even help now came with a warning. By evening, the sky over Lagos had turned the color of tired ash. Shola returned from work dragging his feet, his body heavy like it was filled with wet sand. The narrow corridor was quiet, too quiet. Even the generator that usually coughed life into the building was silent. When he unlocked his door and stepped inside, the first thing his eyes searched for was the chair. It was still there, turned upside down, exactly where he left it. He exhaled slowly, as if he had been holding his breath since morning. His room felt colder than usual. The air had weight, like something unseen was occupying space. He shut the door behind him, dropped his bag, and sat on the edge of his mattress. The thin foam sagged under his weight. Then he remembered the pouch. His finger slipped into his pocket and brought out the small leather bundle Auntie BC had given him. It was light, but it did not feel empty. It carried a quiet seriousness that made his palms sweat. He turned it over slowly. No inscription, no scent, just old leather tied with dark thread. "This small thing is supposed to protect me," he thought. He laughed under his breath, a tired, hollow laugh that carried no humor. Still, he bent down, lifted his pillow, and slid the pouch beneath it. The mattress groaned softly. The chair was still upside down near the wardrobe, facing away from him like a punished child. He lay down. His eyes refused to close. The ceiling stared back at him, cracked in strange patterns that looked like broken roads on a dry map. The building was quiet, the dangerous kind of quiet that came before something terrible. Minutes passed, then more. At exactly midnight, he felt it, a pressure in the room. Not a sound, not a movement, just pressure, like someone had entered without opening the door. His heart began to thump slowly at first, then harder. His fingers curled into the sheet. "Please work," he whispered without moving his lips. Then the chair trembled. Not much, just a slight vibration, like the floor had shifted beneath it. Shola froze. Every muscle in his body tightened until it hurt. The pouch under his pillow grew warm, not hot, warm, like living skin. The chair vibrated again, longer this time, and then it stopped. Dead silence. Shola lay there for several seconds, afraid that even blinking might break whatever invisible balance was holding the room together. Nothing moved, no sound, no footsteps, no breath behind him. Slowly, carefully, he reached under his pillow and brought out the pouch. It had returned to normal temperature, but his heart had not. He sat up, clutching it to his chest like a child holding a last hope. For the first time in days, the room felt empty. Not peaceful, just empty. Morning came quietly. When sunlight finally filtered through the dusty window, Shola was still sitting on the mattress, the pouch resting on his lap, eyes sunken, body exhausted. The plastic chair remained upside down, but it had not moved, not even by an inch. And for the first time since he moved into that room, Shola allowed himself a dangerous thought. Maybe this thing can really stop it.
But deep inside, something whispered back at him, "It hasn't stopped. It's only waiting." The evening air carried a humid weight as Shola returned from work. The narrow corridor smelled faintly of wet cement and cooking fire. He paused outside his door, staring at the plastic chair upside down near the wardrobe. It had been unmoved for days. The leather couch under his pillow had kept him safe. He told himself that. He whispered it to himself. But tonight, something felt different. Shola kicked off his slippers, sweat beading on his brow, and sat on the edge of the mattress. The chair remained stubbornly upside down. It taunted him, almost pleading for disobedience. Just once, he thought, just for tonight. His fingers hovered over the chair's legs. His palms itched with curiosity. It's just plastic. Nothing will happen if I place it back upright. A laugh escaped him, nervous, almost defiant. He leaned forward, ignoring the pouch for the first time in days, and pushed the chair onto its normal position. The room felt immediately heavier, as if the walls themselves were watching. Shola laughed again, louder this time, daring whatever watched him to make a move. He lay back on the mattress, chest rising fast with excitement and fear. Then, just after midnight, he felt the first pressure. It started at his feet, crawling upward like icy fingers. His legs stiffened, refusing to obey. His heart thundered. The chair began to tremble. A soft scrape on the cement floor, then another. Shola tried to scream. Nothing came out. The leather pouch beneath the pillow had no warmth tonight, no power. The chair lifted slightly, just enough for one leg to hover above the floor. Then it slammed down violently, the sound cracking the silence. Shola froze, sweat soaking his shirt. His eyes darted to the ceiling, but nothing else moved. It was waiting, watching, judging. And Shola, for the first time, realized the rule was not a suggestion. It was a lifeline. But he had broken it, and the night had only just begun. Shola had never felt terror like this. The chair was beside him now, upright, its presence suffocating. Shadows twisted across the cracked walls, growing thicker, moving faster than his eyes could follow. He tried to lift his hands. They would not obey. His legs, stiff and unresponsive, refused to bend. His chest rose and fell rapidly, but no breath came easily. The leather pouch under him pulsed faintly, but it was not enough. A low, scraping sound began, first gentle, then loud, deliberate. The chair's legs scraped the cement floor with unnatural precision. Shola felt it before he saw it. The air itself pressed into him, a weight heavier than cement. Something unseen pushed him toward the edge of the bed. He tried to scream. Nothing. The shadows stretched into shapes that lunged at him. They were not human, not animal. They were everything he had been warned about. One reached for his face. He could feel fingers brushing against his skin without touching it. He clutched the leather pouch, whispering every prayer he remembered. Words he did not know the meaning of tumbled from his lips. The chair quivered violently, lifted slightly, then slammed down, hard, shaking the floor. Shola's body arched backward, pain exploding across his back and legs. He gasped silently, every nerve on fire. And then the room went completely silent. Shola's eyes, wide and terrified, searched the darkness. The chair had stopped. The shadows had retreated, but only for a moment. In the silence, he realized something horrifying. This was not the end. The room had tested him, and he had barely survived. Shola collapsed sideways on the mattress, clutching the leather pouch, sweat mixing with tears. His body trembled. The chair stood upright near the wardrobe, motionless. But Shola knew better. It was waiting, patient, silent, hungry, and one day it would rise again.
Morning came slowly over Lagos, painting the dusty streets in muted gold. Shola sat on the edge of his mattress, body aching, chest heaving. The leather pouch lay across his lap, now warm and heavy, as if it carried the weight of the night. The plastic chair remained upright near the wardrobe, silent, innocuous, harmless, or so it seemed. Shola's mind replayed every movement of the previous night, the shadows that twisted across the walls, the air that pressed against him, freezing and suffocating, the chair that stalked him like a predator. For hours he could not move. He stayed seated, clutching the pouch as if it were his only tether to life. By mid-morning, he summoned the courage to stand. His legs shook violently, his arms quivering as he held onto the wall for support. He glanced at the chair. It did not move. It did not breathe. He knew the room had spared him, for now. But he also knew it was patient. It was waiting for the next lapse. Shola stepped outside into the corridor, the morning sun blinding in its brilliance. Neighbors moved about, unaware of the night's horrors. He breathed in deep, trying to fill his lungs with ordinary air, but nothing would feel ordinary again. Back in his room, he turned the chair upside down once more, methodical and careful, whispering a prayer under his breath. The pouch rested under his pillow. He sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled slowly. The room was quiet. For the first time in days, it seemed at peace. But deep inside, Shola knew the truth. Some rules are not meant to be broken. Some objects are not toys. Some nights carry consequences that linger far beyond dawn. The chair stood silently near the wardrobe, the leather pouch beneath the pillow, and Shola he would never forget. He had survived, but the room had left its mark on him, a mark that would never fade. And somewhere in the shadows, the room waited, patiently. Moral lesson. Some rules are there for a reason. Small acts of disobedience can awaken forces we cannot see and cannot control. Courage and vigilance are important, but so is respect for the unseen, for guidance, and for the boundaries that protect us. Shola survived, but he learned that ignoring warnings comes at a cost. Remember, not every room, not every object, and not every advice is ordinary. Respect what you do not understand. If you've enjoyed Shola's story, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Tales by Omoh. And tell us, if you were in Shola's place, would you have obeyed the rule? Watch closely, because the next story could be even more terrifying.